Right, good afternoon. Start off with our continuing updates on the situation in Syria and Türkiye. Starting off with Türkiye this afternoon rather. Today, the Secretary General announced the launching of a $1 billion humanitarian appeal for the people of Türkiye, suffering from the most devastating earthquake to hit the country in a century. The funding, which covers a 3-month period, will assist 5.2 million people and allow aid organizations to rapidly scale up vital support for government-led relief efforts in a number of areas, including food security, protection, education, water, and shelter. The Secretary General said that Türkiye is home to the largest number of refugees in the world and has shown enormous generosity to its Syrian neighbors for years, and now is the time for the world to support the people of Türkiye, just as they have stood in solidarity with others seeking assistance. The needs, as you can imagine, are enormous, the Secretary General said, and people are suffering. There is no time to lose. He urged the international community to step up and fully fund this critical effort in response to one of the biggest natural disasters of our times. Furthermore, as you may well know, just to give you some context, in addition to the millions of Turks who have been impacted, Türkiye also hosts the world's largest number of refugees. More than 1.7 million refugees live in the 11 provinces impacted by the earthquakes, and that's according to our colleagues at UNHCR. The funding from the appeal and the resources will allow aid organizations to swiftly ramp up their operations to support government-led response efforts in areas including food security, protection, education, water, and shelter. Martin Griffiths, the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, who was in the country last week, said the people of Türkiye have experienced unspeakable heartache, and we must stand with them in their darkest hour and ensure they receive the support they need. Turning to Syria, the cross-border response is continuing. Today, 22 trucks carrying aid from the World Food Program and the UN Refugee Agency crossed through the Bab al-Hawa crossing. 2 additional trucks carrying tents provided by UNHCR across the Bab al-Salama crossing. In northwest Syria, shelter needs are the top priority among displaced people. Many homes have collapsed in the aftermath of the earthquakes. As of February 14th, according to the latest information we received, 8,900 buildings have been completely or partially destroyed in the northwest of Syria, leaving 11,000 people homeless. Other priorities, obviously, are in addition to shelter needs and food, are cash assistance and supplies to cope with the harsh winter weather conditions. The Secretary General is about to arrive in Addis Ababa in a few hours, where he will attend the 36th session of the Assembly of the Heads of State and Government of the African Union. On Saturday, he will deliver remarks during the summit's opening ceremony, in which he will highlight the important progress taking place on the continent, notably through the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. He will also call for action to address peace and security threats, the cost of living crisis, as well as the impact of the climate crisis on the continent. These remarks will be webcast live, and we'll be able to share those with you under embargo. While in Addis, the Secretary General is also scheduled to take part in the high-level meetings on the situation in the Sahel, on Libya, as well as the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He will also hold a press conference before leaving. On the margins of the summit, the Secretary General is scheduled to hold a number of bilateral meetings, which we will confirm to you as they happen. And he will also, of course, meet with the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki. Turning to Ukraine, the acting humanitarian coordinator there, Matthew Hollingsworth, condemned yesterday's attack that damaged the warehouse of the national NGO Proliska in Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region. No one was injured, thankfully, in the attack. This was the 3rd attack impacting facilities used to distribute humanitarian assistance in just 2 days. The facility served as a hub from where the organization and other partners, including ourselves, would send relief supplies to people in places which are experiencing heavy fighting and hostilities, such as Bakhmut, Avitka, and other frontline communities. The building was also the center where civilians would gather and to receive assistance in Chasiv Yar. We'd mentioned yesterday the other two strikes that damaged aid facilities in the Donetsk area and Kherson. Today, we sadly found out that the attack in Kherson has also left one aid worker injured. He was part of another national NGO, Tarilka, which is our partner and is supporting the people in frontline communities across the Kherson region. The acting humanitarian coordinator, Mr. Hollingsworth, reminded us all that civilian infrastructure, including aid and health facilities, are vital to the people of Ukraine, and constant care must be taken to spare them from harm. They are not targets, he stressed. Moving to South Sudan and the African continent, the peacekeeping mission in that country, otherwise known as UNMISS, today reported a sharp increase in violence in the country at the end of last year. The violence was mostly concentrated in the Upper Nile, Warab, and Jonglei states. In its quarterly report, the mission said that the number of civilians harmed increased by 87% compared to the same period of last year, same period in 2021, excuse me. This rise was accompanied by a disturbing increase in abductions and conflict-related sexual violence, which have gone up by 464% and 360% respectively. The mission called for urgent action by the government to address the escalating violence and to protect civilians in line with international human rights and humanitarian laws. The mission also said it is undertaking peace, advocacy, and dialogues in addition to conducting hundreds of patrols and establishing temporary operating bases in certain hotspots. In Nigeria, today we launched a $1.3 billion appeal to help some 6 million people in the northeast of the country, more specifically in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe states. This is 500,000 more people than we tried to help last year. The humanitarian coordinator for Nigeria, Matthias Schmale, said the large-scale humanitarian protection crisis in 3 states shows no sign of abating. Some 2.4 million people are in acute need, impacted by conflict, disease, and disaster. Women and girls are the hardest hit, making up more than 80% of the people in need of humanitarian assistance across Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. Child malnutrition is also escalating, and the already high level of severe acute malnutrition are projected to more than double, from 300,000 children impacted last year to a projected 697,000 children this year. Just a note, I was asked about a horrific accident in Panama, and I can tell you the Secretary General is saddened by the death of more than 30 migrants and asylum seekers, including women and children, in a bus accident while transiting through Panama. He expressed his deep condolences to the families and loved one and wishes a speedy recovery to those injured. The UN country team in Panama is coordinating the response to the tragedy with Panamanian authorities. The UN is committed to supporting the government's response to mixed population movements in accordance with international standards and frameworks to facilitate safe, regular, orderly migration, offering opportunities for safe mobility and ensuring protection and assistance as needed. Abdelhamid, you had asked me about our friend Stéphane de Mistura, and I can tell you that Stéphane de Mistura, who, as you know, is the personal envoy of the Secretary General for Western Sahara, is continuing his engagement with all concerned to progress towards a just, realistically sustainable, and mutually agreeable solution to the question of the Western Sahara, in line with relevant Security Council resolutions and with a view of his upcoming briefing to the Security Council in April. At the end of this week, Mr. de Mistura will be attending the Munich Security Conference, where he is planning to conduct further consultations in this regard on the margins of the events in Munich. Education Cannot Wait high-level financing conference began today in Geneva in Switzerland and will continue for 2 days to make good on commitments to ensuring every child everywhere is offered a quality education. In a video message, the Secretary General highlighted that education cannot wait. The UN Global Fund for Education Emergencies and Protracted Crisis is a lifeline for young learners. Today, 222 million girls and boys are affected by the horrors of war, disaster, and displacement. Over 78 million children do not go to school at all. 78 million. The conference seeks to mobilize much-needed resources to deliver on the 4-year strategic plan of Education Cannot Wait, which will mobilize $1.5 billion to reach 20 million children and adolescents caught in some of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Programming note, tomorrow, Fahan Haq will be at the podium. I will not be here. And he will have guests with him to launch the Secretary General's Sustainable Development Goals Stimulus to deliver Agenda 2030 report. And we will send you more details on that as soon as we can. Edith, and then Amélie, and then we'll go take questions, more questions.
Thank you, Steph. The Turkey appeal announced today is to help 5.2 million people, and the one for Syria was nearly 5 million people. I wonder why the number in Turkey is, quite frankly, so small compared to the devastation and the huge number of people who are displaced.
So you mean why do you?
Why it's only 5.2 million people?
I mean it's clear that about, according to our estimates, I mean, and the government's almost more than 15 million people were impacted. The flash appeal was designed in very close cooperation with the government of Türkiye, which is leading the relief efforts. This is the number they came up with for the kind of the focus on the focus on people who needed the most humanitarian aid most quickly, and where the UN could be most effective.
I
assume you have a second question.
Yeah, I do.
From experience. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
frankly, it just seems strange that that the Turkish government wouldn't be asking for.
$1 billion is.
No, I mean for
large.
help for more people.
Right. Yeah. But again, I mean, it's adapted to the structures that are already in place. I mean, Turkey does have already a very efficient search and rescue and humanitarian system. So we are helping where we are designing our assistance in cooperation with the government of Turkey.
And two more related questions. First,
let's go for a world record.
The Secretary General is going to be in Addis. Is he planning to stop in Turkey or Syria on his return?
No travel to share with you at this point.
And any idea when the third crossing point from Turkey to Northwest?
I think as soon as we feel it is operable and safe, we'll put it to use. Amélie.
Thanks, Steph. I have also figure questions on the flash appeals. If we consider that the flash appeal for Turkey is for 5 million people, the one for Syria was also for 5 million people for 3 months, both of them. But the number, the money is, the difference in the money is huge for the same number of people in the same amount of time. So what explains the difference in the money needed for the same number of people?
But part of the reason is that there's already a well-established humanitarian community has been working in Syria on the UN, and there's also the Syria Humanitarian Response Appeal, which is for 2023, which was for $4.8 billion. So there's already a humanitarian pot of money that exists for Syria, which did not exist for Turkey. Ms. Salome.
That was one of my questions, but I have a follow-up. So, do you remember what the appeal was for last year for Syria?
The humanitarian response plan for Syria for 2023 is $4.8 billion, which happens to be our largest single appeal.
Other than Ukraine, or for last year?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm just wondering, we've talked about this before, but I mean, the humanitarian needs for this year were already up 25% over 2022, and that was before the earthquake struck. Is the Secretary General worried about having the resources to respond adequately?
I mean, we're worried about the growing number of people who need humanitarian help. Some of those people need help because they live in a conflict zone, in a man-made disaster. Others are suffering through the wrath of Mother Nature, through like an earthquake. Others, like you look in the Sahel and Lake Chad region, it's a combination of conflict, of climate, of natural disasters. A lot of these issues could be addressed beforehand, so we don't get to this point. This is why also the fight against climate change is so important. The fight for peace and for stability is so important, because in the end, we don't address these problems upstream. We are left with a humanitarian emergency that needs a lot more money than if member states were to invest money upstream on mitigation, on having to deal with a whole host of issues. That being said, we hope that member states find the solidarity and generosity that is needed, also from the public and the private sector.
Sorry, I can't resist one more. The UN's been taking a lot of flack for slow response lately. I mean, do you feel like, given what you just said, that it's fair? I mean, Martin Griffiths talked about the Syrians being, left behind and the challenges there, so no one's denying that. But I don't know what I'm asking. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I think that's all right. So
giving you a chance to defend.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
UN,
I think I know we are. Our humanitarian system is stretched to the limit, right? And again, I think the frustrating thing on our part is that so many of these issues could be addressed beforehand, but everything is left to deal with the consequences of ignoring climate change, of not putting enough effort into peace, into reconciliation, into social cohesion. At the end, it lands on the UN's doorstep. We are working as fast as we can, but we also work within an existing framework, which is international law and the UN Charter, which sometimes forces the UN, as opposed to other relief agencies, to take into consideration and have to respect the political context. And if I were on the receiving end of aid, I would feel nothing is coming quickly enough. But we are now using 2 of the 3 crossing points. I mean, 22 trucks went in today. We have a large number of trucks that have gone in since the beginning of the earthquake, in an area where the existing humanitarian operations that were there themselves suffered the shock of the earthquake. I mean, I was talking to one of my colleagues a couple of days ago who said the drivers that they use to drive the trucks across the border, they have to deal with their families, right? They were impacted by the earthquake. But I think everybody on the UN end got up, shook themselves, dusted themselves off, and went to work. But everything, frustratingly, does take time, and our fuel is cash, and we need that money. Deji, and then the German fellow over there. Go
One
ahead.
quick follow-up, just one question. You just said the $1 billion appeal is decided by the UN and Turkish government.
In consultation.
Yeah, consultation with Turkish government. Has the appeal for Syria also consulted the rebel controlled area? Who has been
We
consulted?
looked. We did assessments. Obviously, we have it is difficult for us to address and to assess directly
exactly.
what is needed.
That's why
It
I
is
asked.
done to the best of our ability, but also in consultation with the government of Syria.
What about the rebel help?
We do it through other means. Obviously, we have humanitarian partners who tell us what they need. We're not doing it blindly. Benno.
Thanks, French fellow. I don't know if that's a question for you or for Paulina, but which of the countries right now is stripped of voting rights in the GA because they didn't pay their dues?
The Article 19, that is a question for me, for which I don't have an answer off the top of my head, but we can get you those numbers pretty quickly.
Not urgent, thank you.
Okay, really? I'll send it not just to the German fella. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Today, the European Parliament adopted a resolution, 1 year of Russian invasion and aggressive war against Ukraine, and an amendment to it, which states, the European Parliament calls on the EU and its member states to take further actions to continue the international isolation of the Russian Federation, including Russian membership in international organizations such as the United Nations Security Council. Is there any reaction from the UN leadership to this call?
Not particularly, but just to restate, I think our principled position is that we do not believe, as far as the United Nations is concerned, that excluding member states is conducive to the long-term search for peace. Murad, and then we'll go to Abdeli, and then Yvonne, and then to the screen.
On Syria, on Rai cross-border, is it not safe only for UN operations, or in general not
no,
safe?
I mean,
I think it's being used for
others are using it. We have specific standards and things that we have to deal with. But I know our colleagues there are working as quickly as possible.
Any progress on the envoy efforts for peace talks? There are reports talking about progress.
I mean, the envoy briefed the council yesterday in close consultations. Nothing particularly to report, except to say that the gains that have been made since the cessation of hostilities came into place, even though it has not been formally resigned, have held. And that means relief for, in a number of areas, for Yemeni men, women, and children. Abdullah. Your microphone, there we go.
Thanks, Steph. I do have a question regarding the migration crisis. Steph, during last 2 days, at least 73 people missing and presumed dead after a boat sinks off Libyan coast. My question is there any action from the United Nations beside of press releases like the one we saw in the International Organization on for Migration? Is there any action vis-a-vis the silent but a huge humanitarian crisis? Thank you.
I mean, I think we have, one thing we have not done is remain silent in face of this, this human tragedy that we see not only in the Mediterranean, but in Central America. I just flagged that, more than 30 migrants and asylum seekers died as they tried to, as they moved through Panama. Colleagues from UNHCR and IOM are working in North Africa to try to help in any way they can. But I think what is clear is that member states need to redouble their efforts to implement the Global Compact on Migration, to work together, countries of origin, countries of transit, countries of destination, to have a safe and orderly flows of people. Right now, it is mostly in the hands of smugglers and criminal gangs, instead of being organized in the way it should. Human migration is never going to stop. and it needs to be managed within established international law parameters. Yvonne, and then we'll let Celia catch her breath.
Thanks. So there are, as you pointed out, many Syrian refugees in southern Turkey, many of whom lost their lives in the earthquakes. I'm hearing from people on the ground that many of the bodies of the Syrian refugees are being moved back across the border, but their families can't go with them for fear of losing their refugee status. Would the Secretary General call for some kind of amnesty for those families so they can at least go home and bury their dead without losing their refugee status?
I had not heard of this specific issue. I will check with our colleagues at UNHCR. It is clear that in this horrendous situation, everyone needs to show flexibility to ensure people can keep their dignity even after they've passed. Celia.
Thank you, Stéphane. So yesterday, the government in Nicaragua, just a week after they expelled over 200 political prisoners, issued a list of over 90 people where they are taking away their nationalities and they're accusing them of crimes against the government. What's the position of the Secretary General on that subject?
Look, I mean, the Secretary General was alarmed to see the decision by the government of Nicaragua to strip 94 of its civilians of civil and political rights, notably the right of citizenship, nationality, and the right of property. This measure, which was also applied to, I think, more than 220 detainees who were released last week, that is also something that is very alarming. I think it bears recalling that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has a right to a nationality and that no one should be arbitrarily deprived of it. The Secretary General was encouraged by the release of the 222 citizens that had been detained by the authorities in Nicaragua. He calls on the government to release the remaining persons under the same conditions without stripping them of their citizenship. The right to nationality is a fundamental human right. There should be no persecution or reprisals against human rights defenders or individuals expressing critical views.
Quick follow-up. Spain had offered, and they started the process to give citizenship to a lot of the detainees that came to the United States. Has the UN been in contact with other countries and maybe other countries that might be open to provide that? And is this SG open to talk to Ortega and his government?
I'm not aware that we've been in touch with any countries on the fate of the status of the 222 former detainees. We are always ready for a dialogue if it will be useful. Okay. Thank you all. I don't see any questions or hear any questions, but I do see Paulina, and you will hear from her shortly.